This is Stephen Winzenburg for KNDR Radio, and we're with McLean Stevenson, the star of the TV show MASH. He's in Bismarck for the opening of the new Dayton store.
What's your impression of the Bismarck folks? I know you only got to see them for a couple of hours.
Those people that I've met have been very nice. Lord knows I've tried to meet as many as I could. We did a big thing out here at Dayton in the mall, and then went out to dinner and met a lot of people there, and then went and played 21 in the lounge at the Sheraton. So I did as best I could to meet many people as I could, and they're nice people. I've been at a couple of different stations this morning, and most of the people are kind of like they are in my hometown. I come from a small town, and they're very friendly, and the problems of the small town are not that much different than they are of the big city. It's just here they seem to be a little more interested in one another and a little more friendly and willing to stop and talk and visit with you. So I've enjoyed it so far. I'm sorry I haven't gotten around to see much of the city.
You mean in all your travels before you never got to North Dakota?
No, there's a golf tournament. I can't think of the name of it for the life of me. That's been up in this part of the country for years. Is that the Roger Maris one? Well, I'm not even sure that that's it, but if it is it, I've been invited to it every year, and it's a great tournament. A lot of people have come to it and had a great time. So I'm looking forward to coming here. Bob Hope was here not too terribly long ago, and he had a great time. He liked it. He had told me about the fact that he likes to get in the car. He and Dolores like to get in the car and drive around and look at stuff. We've got a lot of historical places here, and it was the sort of starting point for Custer's Last Stand, and there's a lot of,
Are you telling me that you stars out there sit around and talk about North Dakota in your spare time?
No, but I spent some time with Bob Pope. We did a bunch of shows together this last summer. And in your traveling, you just talk about different places, and he's so well received wherever he goes. He has a good time wherever he goes. But he stayed here at the Sheraton, so it hasn't, I don't know how long the Sheraton's been there, but yeah. And Bob, I learned a lot from traveling around with him because people are basically the same, wherever you go. And the issues in the different communities, like I was talking to a guy last night, and we were discussing some of the things that are maybe unique to Bismarck that might be considered unique to people who live here, but they're really not too unlike problems that we have in Los Angeles or in the area in the valley where we live out there. So it's just, people are pretty much the same wherever you go. I think they're a lot less stressful. I don't think there's as much stress in an area like Bismarck, which is great, but they're no less intelligent or anything else. They're nice people.
So when you have a family and you're raising a family, are you saying it doesn't make that much difference whether it's here in the Midwest or out there on the West Coast?
No, I think the pressures on a child on the West Coast are infinitely greater than they are in Bismarck. But you have to be careful because the 12-year-old, 13-year-old today are far more sophisticated than they were, when I was growing up. And the peer pressure and the temptations are just as great, You have just as many problems in Bismarck as we do in Los Angeles. It's just that there's a sort of a sense of indifference to the problems in a city like Los Angeles, where I think at least people care about it. At least I would hope they would. They seem to.
So then why would you choose to raise your children out there?
Because that's where I make my living. It would be difficult for me to raise my children in Bismarck and go to work every morning in Hollywood. So,
if you had a choice, though, that's what I'm saying. Do you ever think about that?
Yeah. If I had a choice, I think I would raise my children in a smaller town. I would still, though, travel as much as I do and take them around and see different things. I mean, to give them the kind of a broad picture of what, life and the world is really like. The one problem you can have in a small community in the Midwest like my hometown is that you get a fairly jaded picture of what life is. And then when you get to a major city as an adult, sometimes it's a shock to you. And so I think that children should be exposed to a lot of experiences. I just think that with this kind of a background in a small town, they're maybe better able to deal with them when they do get to the city.
I noticed in your biography it says that you have a real concern about helping kids. Can you tell us a little about that, what you're involved with?
Well, for a long time, there's so many things being done for children that have muscular dystrophy and birth defects and those things, for which we all feel sorry and make as whatever contribution we can to help. But very little has been done for the healthy kid, for the well kid. They have problems too. And the kind of problems that they have is that they're not struck down with some illness so much as they are, in my case, I deal with children who are burned, who are the victims of generally adult neglect. Because you see, children don't have the wherewithal to buy a smoke detector. Children aren't able to turn the hot water heaters down to low rather than keep them at medium. Children don't drive cars while they're drinking. Children don't smoke in bed. Children don't lay linoleum floors and forget to turn the gas pilot light off on a water heater, and then when the fumes from the glue build up, have explosions. So they're victims. Many of the kids that I deal with now, their whole lives changed in a matter of seconds. In one moment, they're normal, healthy children, and in the next, they're cinders. That's the only way to describe it. We're dealing with a little boy now whose father was working on a car and was priming the carburetor with gasoline that he had in a plastic can, and the child was standing there watching his dad on a Saturday morning in the garage. The father started the car and it ignited the spark, and the little boy has 75% third-degree burns on his body in a matter of 12 seconds. Now, he went from a little kid that looked like Ricky Schroeder, or just a normal little 7-year-old kid, to a cinder. He has no ears, his eyebrows are gone, his nose is gone, his mouth is burned shut. He'll have keloid scars all over his body. His left arm is fused to the left side of his body, and if he lives, it'll be a miracle. I think in this case he will, because he's a pretty tough kid. But those kids I really am trying to help as best I can. And if we can get your Governor Sinner and Governor Graham down in Florida and another bunch of governors that are pretty progressive in some of their thinking to change some of the state laws that will include children who are burned, to get state aid as far as restorative and cosmetic surgery, so it can give these kids at least back their dignity, then we'll have done a good thing. And I think he's a good guy. I'm sorry I didn't get a chance to talk with him yesterday. I know a good friend of his is Governor Graham in Florida, and I had a message for him. So if he's listening, the message is to be nice to McLean.
It's interesting you talk about burns. I have a third-degree burn on my leg from when I was 20 months old. A coffee pot was tipped over on me. Have you got something personal, not necessarily for you, but someone close to you? Is that why you got involved in this cause?
I was burned when I was 6. I was looking at a pumpkin in the backyard, and I took the top off the pumpkin, and the air got to the candle, and the flame went up, and the fire, and the sweater caught on fire, and like everybody who sets themselves or gets set on fire, I ran. You don't think to stop, drop and roll. That's what you're supposed to do, but that's hard to do when you're burning. So I ran for about a block, and an old man threw me up against the side of a building and wrapped me up in a doormat and put me out. It's interesting. Most people that have anything to do with burns, just until recently, until we really started talking about this nationally. See, burns, liquid and fire burns, are the #1 killer of children in this country. We think of the more exotic disorders like multiple sclerosis and muscular dystrophy and cerebral palsy and stuff. We lose more kids to burns every year than Jerry Lewis does to muscular dystrophy. And they're still looking for a cure, and we got it. That's the whole basis for our fundraising efforts, is we've got the cure. Turn the hot water heaters down. If your mom's cooking on the stove, keep the handles pointed toward the wall. The women will have coffee, in the morning, and they'll have little toddlers walking around. Well, you got to keep those cups of coffee into the center of the table, and you shouldn't use a tablecloth, even though it may be fashionable, because the kids will pull on it and it comes over on them. And you see, coffee that would be palatable for an adult, that you could even put your hand in or drink, dumped on a toddler in a very short period of time will, wherever it lands, that's going to be a third-degree burn. It will start as a first, and then it'll go as a second, and then it'll evolve into a third-degree burn. And those children are scarred for life. Now, you're lucky that it was on a place that doesn't show, but we've got a kid now, a little girl by the name of Stephanie at the Sherman Oaks Community Hospital in the burn center, whose mom was drinking coffee and she's pulled it off over the table on her face, and she's going to have real problems for the rest of her life. She's never, because there's no miracles. These kids are never going to look like they did before. That's the sad part. The parents who are so riddled with guilt because it was because of his fixing the car, her having the coffee, that one moment when the mother does something and turns and the baby slips into the tub, whatever, that's a feeling of guilt they're going to bear the rest of their lives. And so it's hard for them to deal with that. It's hard for us to, they want to do something now because they feel so guilty. So rather than get them to talk about their stories or try to get their guilt out any other way, what we do is we get all these parents together. It's sort of like group therapy, and they all sit there and talk about what they did wrong and how they could help. And many of our best workers, many of our best volunteers are the parents of children that were responsible for their children being burned. About 95% of the burns are induced by neglect, and that's a terrible indictment, but it's the truth. It's these are healthy kids one moment, and then they become victims. And then also there are the children. There are abused children. We work very closely with child help. There are many abused children whose parents, and it's so hard for me to perceive this, but burn them with cigarettes, burn them with fire, and that's a horrible form of abusement. We deal with some of those kids, but by and large, the kids that we deal with are the ones who are burned as the result of someone's neglect, generally that of an adult. The other 5% are those things, those acts of God, an automobile accident, even though the child was in its belt and the father or the mother was free from any guilt or something. Those things we can't prevent that. But if we could reduce 95% of them, which I know we could, we'd save about 10 kids' lives a day. That's what we lose in this country. It's incredible, and you don't hear very much about it because there's so much guilt attendant to it.
What about the psychological effects on kids? It's not just physical.
That's horrendous. We have a program now of psychological rehabilitation. It depends on the child and how they're received back into the community, but it's a big problem because, especially for a youngster that's burned when they're 6 or 7, they have so much surgery, so much stuff to face for the first 5 or 6 years. About the time they're going into becoming teenagers and dating and going through that process, that's where the problems start. So that's where we have our volunteer counselors, psychologists, and psychiatrists that are helping. We found that the best therapy for the kids is to get the other kids that were burned with kids that were burned. We do a kind of a one-on-one program that way. We'll take a youngster who was a burn victim, and a teenager can be very helpful to a 7-year-old, especially if that teenager is active in his or her community. We have a youngster at the University of California who's studying medicine there, a girl by the name of Bong McToran, who was a Vietnamese war victim, and she was 18 months old. Her family was just totally wiped out right around her in a raid on a village, and she was burned almost beyond recognition, and a GI picked her up and took her to a German medical unit, and the German medical unit put her on a German medical ship, and then the medical ship took her to Tokyo, and then they flew her to Los Angeles, and she's been cared for about the last 12 years. Well, she's psychologically very strong now. She's 18 years old, an A student, doing very well at the University of California. She's one of the big helpers in our program with these kids, like a David Rothenberg, whose father set him on fire out in California. Bong works with David. She sees him at least once a week. And she's very inspirational and helps these kids.
Now, are you getting a lot of support from your friends, others in the Hollywood community? This isn't quite as obvious as the Jerry Lewis cause or something.
Very new, but in my going around, and we just did a big show and a golf tournament and a whole fundraising thing down in Tampa, Florida. They have a burn center there that we were helping. And we got Perry Como and Jackie Gleason and people like that. And when they saw these kids and realized the scope of the problem, we're going to start a rather extensive campaign of public service announcements, and we have people like that doing them for us. There's a lot of causes, there's a lot of people asking for money, but I am convinced that one of the best ways to solve problems, that I'm not a Republican per se. Winston Churchill once said, if when you're 21 you're not a liberal, there's something wrong with you, and if by the same token when you're 40 you're not someone conservative, there's also something wrong with you. May be true. But like, for example, here you've got a library bond issue in Bismarck, and it's been going up and being defeated and going up and being defeated and going up and being defeated. Pretty soon, maybe private capital, private enterprise will get together and raise the funds necessary to do the job, okay? We can no longer depend on the federal or the state government to do what we can do at local levels, and that's what our program is predicated on for the Byrne Foundation. And that is a grassroots thing where people in communities get together and help themselves and help others to help themselves. And I'm convinced that'll work. If Reagan did one good thing in the time he's been in office, it's to throw back into the laps of private enterprise some of the responsibility for taking care of the local problems. And we have, for example, in Los Angeles, a whole multiplicity of public services that overlap. I mean, the sheriff's doing the job of the police, and the police overlap in terms of the state police, and it's a mess. And it's just duplicate services which cost more money. So now that they're running it like a business, and they've all joined forces and clearly defined the boundaries and all work and operate out of one building, one emergency call number, it's probably saving the taxpayers millions of dollars. Well, if they'd have put that on a referendum, we'd have waited till hell froze over before it had ever gotten passed. So that things on the local level can be handled if people will take an interest. And that's the problem, getting people interested. But I'm amazed that every place I go, I will find someone like yourself who as a child was burned. Very few people have not been touched in one way or another by a burn, liquid, or fire in their lives. It's just part of everyday living. And so now we're getting some interest and getting some community support, and it's working.
You talked about the psychological effects. Did you have some psychological ramifications from your burn?
No, I can't tell you. I think as a victim, you just don't know those things. I don't know. I don't know if I would have been any different had I not been burned. You know, I don't know that having been burned was that big a deal for me, except I just remember it was horribly painful and inconvenient and stuff. There were certain things for quite a period of time I couldn't do. You don't know what you miss if you don't do those things, you know what I mean? But I see these kids, and I know, I can see what they're missing. I mean, the little kid that Stephanie, you know, she's a toddler, and just right now, for example, she was just learning to walk, okay? So in my view, she's been robbed of the joy of learning that when she falls down, she can get herself up, because she is in no position now to fall and hurt herself or dislodge those transplants, that skin tissue. So she's just never going to know how much fun it is to know as a little kid that she can walk. I don't know if anybody when they're an adult remembers that, but at this time and place in her life, she's not going to know that. All she knows is that it hurts. Whatever she does hurts. Hurts her to walk, hurts her to talk, hurts her to breathe. And that's a horrible thing to see happening to a little youngster. I mean, that's horrible for anybody, but it wasn't her fault. It wasn't something that she did. See, I can kind of accept, well, spastic children. That's something that we don't know about. That's an act of God. And you look at a spastic child and you think, oh my God, just, you know, thank God my kids are not like that. And you try to do what you can. It's different when you look at a child that fortunately was not born with that, and that through someone's neglect is as disfigured and impaired in many ways as that spastic child. And psychologically probably just, or even maybe more so, devastated. The younger these children are that we deal with, the little easier the problems are in taking care of them psychologically and physiologically. But it's the kids 8, 9 years old. There's some real problems there, very serious problems. And so all I'm trying to do is to just get people together so that if nothing else, we can give them back their dignity. We can restore them cosmetically and so forth to a degree where at least they'll get back out into the community. And that's why Governor Sinner, and that's why Governor Graham, and that's why these governors at their next governor's meeting are going to have to get off their butts, Democrats and Republicans alike, and understand that they got to change this law. They've got to change it. There's lots of things that need to be changed, but this is one thing that's already on the books, and it's a very simple thing. They just have to amend the thing that they have on the books now that prevents children who were victims of burns from getting help by allowing them to have cosmetic and restorative surgery. That's not a burden on the tax roll. This little girl, if we don't give her the surgery, will lose her left ear and her left eye. That's going to cost the state of California $300 for the eye, $300 for the ear in welfare payments for the rest of this child's life. That's $600 a month times 12. She's only 3, and if she lived to be 70, you multiply that times 67. The surgical procedure that's necessary to take care of those problems would probably come in the neighborhood of $1,800. So the state, in this case, is penny-wise and really pound-foolish. And I think guys like Governor Sinner and Governor Graham and Governor Duke Majan, whether they just have crossed political boundaries and they're beginning to see this. And he's a good guy up there, Governor Sinner, and I think he'll help us.
Let me ask you one more question. I noticed out there when you were signing autographs that the kids really are attracted to you, and I never thought of you in terms of being someone that the kids would be attracted to. I've always thought you in very adult terms. I don't know why, but maybe that...
I relate better, I think, to children almost than I do adults, and I kind of talk to them rather than at them, and I don't talk down to them. One of the things, if you notice out there, every time I'd ask a kid his name, the mother or the father were very quick to say it's Aaron or it's Jennifer, and I wouldn't let it go at that. I would ask the child until the child said its name. Because that's an awful thing. I mean, a child knows its name. It may just be a little shy, or she may be a little shy. They may not be as fast as spelling, and I know the parents are trying to make it easier for me, but I think in trying to make it easier for me, they make it harder for the kids. So I just keep, and they kind of like that. They understand that I know that they know their name and that they know how to spell it, and that I'll sit there until as long as it takes for them to do that.
Well, what was it about you? I mean, when you were on TV or something, I'm trying to think if there were particular roles that the kids identified with. I mean, of course, I suppose they identify with Mr. T, too, so... Not that I'm putting you and Mr. T in the same category.
No, because I think that's a terrible... boy, as a role model, I think he set black people's movement back 100 years. I mean, if the last thing black people need are a great big freak with a lot of jewelry and screaming and violence. But in any event, I don't know the man. I do know him, and it's a big joke because he's a very gentle, very kind man, and it's a character he's playing. But it's still, it has its effect, and you hear these kids using those lines, and I question that. I think a lot of kids could identify with. I've never done anything in a show where it's been threatening to the children, and they've been broad enough and physical enough in the comedy that I've done that they can kind of laugh at it. I honestly don't know, except I think children are very perceptive and intuitive, and they know whether you like them or not. A kid knows whether you really like them or not. You can't. They can spot a phony like that. Now they may not know how to express it, and they're very slow to make friends, and they're not. See, they're not all cluttered. They're not phony. They're not anything. They're just what they are. What you see is what you get, and they're very simple, and they cut through a lot of things that adults, because we've had so many different experiences with so many different things, they can see through someone pretty quickly. They're very perceptive, and they know that I like them, and so I think they like that.
I got to ask one more quick question. I asked this of other people I interview. when you do shows and things, do you sit at home and watch yourself? Do you critique yourself? If you know you're going to be on a TV movie or on a special, do you make sure you're home at that time to watch it? Or if there's an old rerun of something on, do you watch it?
I watch the reruns of MASH. I tell you, it is a good question. My wife is a very good judge of what I do best. And more often than not, Ginny will watch it. And she'll say, gee, I ought to see it. I think you're really going to be very happy with it. So I'll watch it then. We'll tape it or something. It's difficult for me to watch myself because I can't just... I find myself saying, gee, I wish I hadn't done that. I wish I had done this, or I never should have done that, or why did I do this, or that's dumb, you know. I don't know. I just... I suppose someone that enjoyed looking at themselves in the mirror might also enjoy looking at themselves on television. I don't know. For my part, to answer your question, I'm not that excited about knowing I'm going to be on. I'm a little tentative. So I suppose that too is childlike. I'm a little bit afraid of failing.